Architecture Department of Cal Poly Pomona, and practiced landscape architecture for over a decade before joining the team at Cal Poly. Her work centers around design for mental health and well-being, equity, and resilient communities. In 2017, she was selected as one of the inaugural Fellows for Innovation and Leadership by the Landscape Architecture Foundation, for her work to explore school design strategies that support students' mental health. And in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Claire founded and organized the Emergency Schoolyard Design Volunteers as part of the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative. As I'm sure many of some of the formal educators know here too, that there's an immense interest right now for outdoor learning and play environments. And she received a huge number of requests for design and planning assistance from educators through this pandemic. Her book, Schools That Heal, Design with Mental Health in Mind, was published by Island Press in June 2021. And otherwise, Claire, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Emily and Mary. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm so happy to see you all. I'm going to just try sharing my screen. And as we were talking before before everyone came in, I just applaud all of you educators for surviving this last 18 months, 2 years. This is for you. I'm going to be sharing lessons from just a few of the key lessons from Schools That Heal, Design with Mental Health in Mind. And as probably many of you in environmental education are aware, 50 years of research shows that viewing and being in nature calms our breath, reduces our heart rates, reduces stress, reduces anxiety, and brings communities together. Rachel and Stephen Kaplan developed their attention restoration theory to explain the restful, restorative qualities of views and access to nature. Doctors William Sullivan, Francis Kuo, Andrea Faber-Taylor, and Dongyan Lee, as well as their graduate students, have published many studies quantifying the benefits of trees in and around the school campus and views to trees from big classroom windows. But a lot of that research has stayed in academic journals. So Schools That Heal is really an attempt to bring the research to the general public, where regular people like you and me can use it and act on it. Before 2020, a groundbreaking survey of 17,000 people found that 2/3 of the general population suffered from at least one adverse childhood experience. Around 20% experienced 3 or more. Adverse childhood experiences result in trauma that follows us throughout our lifetimes, and the symptoms are often invisible or misleading. Students might act out fear with anger or hyperactivity, or by just checking out. Education experts suggest treating all students with care, knowing that the likelihood is that they struggle from adversity. In 2016, the Los Angeles Unified School District found that of students screened, 50% suffered moderate to severe PTSD, and 98% had experienced at least one traumatic event. And these rates are probably similar in most school districts, especially those experiencing with high rates of poverty or in cities and metropolitan areas. In fact, many of today's public school students deal with layered crises of poverty, trauma, fear of school shootings or neighborhood violence, and a genuine concern for the planet and for the systemic inequities that plague our systems, including education. Now add to these the short and probably long-term effects of the pandemic and remote learning. Learning outside, now the good news, learning outside can change how teachers see students and how students feel about themselves. In her 2019 landscape architecture master's thesis, Lisa Strong asked 19 teachers to participate in an outdoor learning intervention, which basically meant that they taught outside for 30 minutes twice a week. It wasn't a long intervention, but it was 6 weeks of 30-minute sessions twice a week. Before the study, she asked teachers whether they thought outdoor learning could engage students academically. As you might expect, 78% of teachers said yes, 22% said sometimes. But when asked about struggling students, the numbers were lower. 50% said it was true that outdoor learning could engage students academically, and 50% said sometimes. After the intervention, 100% of teachers said it was true for all students, including struggling students, that outdoor learning could engage students academically. Perhaps more importantly, Strong asked teachers how struggling students face setbacks. Before the intervention, on the left, 100% of teachers answered that struggling students give up too quickly when faced with setbacks. After teaching outdoors, 0 teachers answered they give up too quickly. 60% of teachers thought that struggling students bounced back after setbacks, and 40% answered that students worked harder. This striking shift in perception lasted after the learning intervention ended. After returning to the classroom full time, 3/4 of the teachers answered that struggling students bounce back when faced with setbacks. Notice that no teachers answered struggling students give up too quickly after teaching outdoors just twice a week for 12 weeks. Imagine the long-term impacts on those students to be thought of as able to learn by their teachers. As part of the National Outdoor Learning Initiative last year, Green Schoolyards America gave a $20,000 grant to Kingsley Elementary School in Los Angeles to create 4 outdoor classrooms. This was intended to help students and teachers feel safe as they came back to school. In just 3 months, we helped Kingsley principal Karina Salazar plan and build 4 outdoor classrooms that teachers could reserve to hold classes outside and a teacher meeting space. Before the outdoor classrooms were installed, teachers and students and families were really hesitant to come back to school. And after teachers saw the outdoor spaces, they were all booked within a couple of days. On a deeper level, immersion into nature through experiential and place-based learning, like a lot of you are already doing, such as our own environmental science education programs, have an enormous impact on students developing attitudes and behavior that will protect the environment. Experiencing grand nature is part of this. Positive experiences in nature builds nature connectedness and encourages students to develop an environmental identity. This is vital as we prepare our next generation to become environmental managers. But my focus is really on the school site itself. This is where students spend a majority of their waking hours. The average American student spend 15% of their lifetimes in schools. So that has an enormous opportunity to shape how they experience that school. We can develop school systems and spaces that support mental health and well-being, support counseling programs, contribute to the curriculum, such as science and health standards, physical education standards, arts, contribute and support restorative justice programs, and boost attendance and enrollment. We can design school environments that boost the immune system, improve academic outcomes, help heal trauma, reduce stress and anxiety, increase a sense of safety, and improve environmental health and climate resilience. We can design schools that heal. I've found 3 main principles of design strategies that support mental health: to create environments that nurture a sense of belonging, provide nature-filled places, and inspire awe, curiosity, or wonder. And I'm going to share examples of each one of those. Schools that emulate each one of those. These school samples were designed with mental health in mind and had recent improvements done. Eagle Rock Elementary is one that is near and dear to my heart. This is where my children went to school. It's a public school in Los Angeles. It's a Title I school. And this is a drawing of what the campus looks like today. You can see there's a large grassy field, park-like field in the middle of the schoolyard. There are a couple of organic natural play spaces that double as outdoor classrooms. And around the perimeter of the school are large, mature shade trees. In the 20s, when this school was built, we were coming out of the Spanish flu and tuberculosis pandemics. And it was built with fresh air, natural daylight, and plenty of access to nature in mind. You can see those large tilt-in windows. The school, that original school building, even though it's had a couple of additions, it still largely behaves that way. The windows are still there. The classrooms have wood floors, high ceilings. These old 1920s buildings were designed to address similar issues that we're facing today. And the design intention is still there. This is, the circles are showing the steam radiators under the classroom windows. And this was an intentional design strategy to allow the windows to remain open during the coldest winter months while keeping the room warm. And I'm showing this to you because, you know, we've had creative solutions before to health crises. And a lot of what we are thinking about doing now is coming from that thinking 100 years ago. But my big focus is going to be on the play yard. This is what the play yard looked like. It's probably the same, or maybe a little more sparse, or maybe a little bit greener, because there you actually have a lot of views to trees on around the perimeter of the school than a lot of the schools that you all attended or teach in. I can't remember what year now, it's been so long, but in 2000, I think it was like 2009, I taught a school design studio with some Cal Poly Pomona students, and we partnered with second and third graders. My youngest was in second grade at the time, and reimagined this school. And a few years later, a group of parents wrote a California State Stormwater Grant to translate their student designs into a living schoolyard. And this is the design. The design was a collaboration between the school community, teachers, parents, students, and administrators, plus a dear friend of mine, behavior health researcher, Dr. Marcella Rainey, and Green Schoolyards America founder Sharon Danks helped us as well. We replaced 21,000 square feet of asphalt with a native learning garden, with habitat around seating, informal seating. We created shade tree rows to break up the large areas of the play yard, and a central park-like space dotted with shade trees. And the design is a little funny because we worked around the areas on campus that Dr. Rainey's research students found were being really well used, like the handball walls and the basketball courts. And we took out the asphalt that was largely unused, which was mainly in that big center area. We needed to keep the infrastructure that was working, like the kickball diamonds, and work around things like fire lanes and stuff like that. And we also placed trees in front of classroom windows where there were none, because we wanted every classroom to have a green view. This is what the school looked like shortly after it was finished. The two right images and the bottom left image from the existing asphalt on the top left. The learning garden is surrounded by small hills. It's difficult to see in this bottom left photograph, but they're just tall enough, like 2 or 3 feet, to give a real sense of being away, which is important. And I'm going to share a little video, see if it goes. This is what the schoolyard looked like before any changes were made. You can see there's a little bit of movement, that there are children playing basketball and handball, a lot of children kind of milling around slowly. And Stephanie Leach, the principal at the time, is going to tell us what the transformation did for the students. This is the before.
It's been fantastic. I mean, they're running, they're playing, they're tumbling. It's inviting a lot more creativity. There are all kinds of different surfaces to explore, logs to climb on, and stumps to jump off of. So it invites just sort of a different interaction with the environment than they get on your basic asphalt.
And Dr. Rainey and her students did a longitudinal study to look at behavior, social and physical behavior in students before and after the schoolyard was improved. They found that students spend more time in small groups in the greener play areas than they did in the asphalt play areas, which associated with more positive social interactions. Antisocial or negative social interactions like bullying decreased by 40 to 50% after the improvements. There's a graph showing that. And 33 to 40 students who previously sat sedentary during recess were now active in every recess period after the schoolyard improvements. And this had a big impact on physical activity and long-term physical health, as well as social behavior and friendships. Teachers told Principal Leach after the schoolyard was improved that they estimated they gained about 20 minutes of classroom time to teach, because students now were coming in after recess, sort of played out and ready to learn. They had gotten to do what they wanted to do outside instead of coming back more hyper and having to be redirected every 2 seconds. Dr. Rainey also did a follow-up study to look at how green renovations were acting. Like, for instance, in these two schools, both schools are about the same size, and the campus on the right in Pasadena has 50% of its schoolyard is that grass lawn. Eagle Rock Elementary, this is it from above, has about 28% green space. But Eagle Rock Elementary has more variety. Even though it has less green space, there are more different areas, things that students can choose to do. Whereas the Jackson Elementary schoolyard is asphalt or lawn and a few trees. She found that boys are more active than girls on sport-specific green space, but that there's no difference in time spent active by younger and older students if the play spaces are divided and varied and challenge motor skills. So this is like an equity solution for physical activity if you can really provide some variety on your school grounds. And of course, natural materials are really engaging. I want to show another school, Sandy Hook Elementary, which all of you are probably familiar with. In 2012, 20 children and 6 adults died at Sandy Hook Elementary School in one of the worst school shooting massacres in our history. Afterwards, the Newtown School District scheduled district-wide renovations to rebuild Sandy Hook School first. The surviving students, teachers, staff, and community members really needed a new space, a new school to help them heal and move forward. And the key to the design process was a deep community engagement process. Architects, Svigals and partners facilitated the design process, and they selected 50 community advisors to drive design solutions and decisions. This included teachers, mental health professionals, public health experts, social workers, students, designers, parents, and security advisors. And the interdisciplinary group represented really well the interests of the community and fostered a holistic view of safety and wellness. In the years since Sandy Hook, schools and districts around the country hardened their perimeters, added automatic gates, security cameras, and guards to watch buildings. And yet Sandy Hook Elementary took a different approach. The community wanted a school that symbolized an embrace. The advisory team wanted the school to be secure, but not at the cost of feeling safe. And since no other school had been designed specifically with this in mind, there was no comparable design strategy or guidelines to turn to. So instead, they looked to the research on human behavior and feelings of safety, much of which I mentioned very briefly at the beginning. You can see the new design is full of wood, natural materials. It's welcoming and warm and connects the school community to the healing qualities of nature. The building reaches out to the community in a broad curve, like two arms outstretched. In the communal space in the front entry, a central shared space opens 2 stories to the ceiling with stained glass panels adorning a back wall made completely of glass. Morning sunlight streams through those windows. You can see throwing yellow and red light onto the furniture and floors, and flocks of birds adorn the walls, lifting in flight towards the sky. The architects sited the building close to the woods and a wetland that edged the school property. This is the back of the school. The location and the layout of the school give every classroom views of trees. And biophilic design, or the idea that we need nature because we evolved in nature and we need nature for our health and well-being, was a central principle. This school not only looks out onto the woods, but it's also full of natural materials and references to nature. And on the end of each of the 3 classroom wings, there's a little space like this, a little treehouse space like this, to provide a cozy, sort of stress relieving area for students to spend time alone or with their friends. That's something that's really hard to find on most schools, a place to be quiet. Webster Middle School, we're back in LA County now, was built in 1954, like so many of our schools after the World War II baby boom, post-World War II baby boom. It used this, what's called a finger plan, with rows of narrow classrooms connected by an outdoor walkway shaded by an overhang. These were built in the 50s and really standardized across the country to accommodate all of those children that started going to school. They were also designed with the idea of trying to make a human scale or a more homey feeling to school, unlike the older school buildings that were sometimes 2, 3, 4 stories tall, and some of our new school buildings too. They were 1 story, and they were based on the progressive school principles of connecting indoors and outdoors and presenting a more home-like scale of architecture. In 2015, the school was selected by the California State Water Resources program to do a massive stormwater infrastructure upgrade, and community engagement and education was a big part of that. I'm highlighting, well, first of all, I'm showing you that the school was built in 1954, and 10 years later, the two of our major freeways in LA County were built like pretty much on top of it. This is a really common issue for schools. And then the yellow highlighted areas are the areas that we focused on for improvement because, again, classrooms look out onto them, and we wanted to really place improvements where students would most benefit from them. The design interventions included new trees, habitat gardens in between those classrooms, a new entry garden, and then on towards the, I can't remember what direction that is, west side of the field, there was a big marshy area where all the rainwater would run off to, and it flooded the neighbors' yards. So they wanted to do a big biofiltration swale along that edge. This is what one of the courtyards between the classroom buildings looked like before the interventions. And this is what it looked like afterwards. So really big change in what these students are seeing every day on their way into and out of the classroom. I also want to point out that you can see the classroom to the right, the classrooms to the right. These are facing north, these windows. Look at the layers of obstacles to that view and to the daylight. There are blinds closed, security screens. Some schools I see cardboard or posters or corkboard up blocking the windows. We really have to do a better job as environmental educators, educating teachers that it's in their best interests and their students' best interests to actually be able to see outside. If they're daydreaming, looking out the window, they're doing what their bodies are telling them to do. They're doing what is good for them and what's good for their learning. And this approach started, here's a school that was designed in 1935 in Southern California by Richard Neutra. And this kind of outdoor-indoor learning was really an extension of that 1920s architecture to improve daylight and views, but taking it to the next level. Look at that. I mean, wouldn't you all love a classroom like that completely opens into a garden? Those 1950s schools were based on this idea. So here's the soggy edge of the field at Webster before. I can think of a lot of schools that look like this. And here's that same edge of the field transformed into a habitat garden with some seating areas with boulders and shade trees. This is like the month after it was planted. So you can imagine in 2 or 3 years or 5 or 10, this is going to be a full riparian woodland. And then the area outside of the cafeteria had been mostly asphalt with a few trees planted in like 4 foot by 4 foot tree wells. And those were expanded to connect to each other and allow stormwater to infiltrate. And this wall acts to give students a much needed place to sit and hang out with their friends, but it also protects the planting and the stormwater filtration area. And then environmental education is spread throughout the school, just signs to remind students and teachers and community members. This is really important as teachers transfer from school to school to give teachers a resource on their campus to sort of remember the history of the changes. As principals leave more frequently too, we need to find ways to institutionalize that memory so that it can keep going. The last school I'm going to share is one that is in Berlin, Germany, which is known in outdoor green schoolyard movements as like the goal, the be all end all. They've been doing this for 20 years with the intention of supporting mental health and well-being, improving safety, and increasing climate resilience. So this is Betraven Community High School in Berlin. And you can see from the drawing, one of my students did these beautiful drawings, by the way. You can see from the drawing, it's about as different as you can imagine from high schools we have here in Southern California. There's a little area for organized sports that's kind of fenced off into the corner. The majority of the campus is very organic, natural feeling, lots of trees. This net in the middle is a sand volleyball court that the students begged for until the maintenance team and facilities team agreed to let them have it. And any of you that work in a school know that was a hard lift. This school is very similar to a lot of our schools in Southern California. It was originally built in the 40s, and it had an addition. That's the old, to the bottom right, the 40s building, and then it had a 70s addition. Many of our schools that were added to or renovated in the 70s look very similar and blocky. And then the stormwater, the green schoolyard improvement was done in 2010. It's a high school in a low-income immigrant neighborhood in Berlin, designed very much with the students and the community, and with an eye to keeping it open. So this school is open on the weekends and through the summers for the community to use and to take care of, and they do help maintain it. You can see the tree, there are tons of trees and gardens, breaking up the large courtyard, lots of smaller contemplative spaces like this little bench, lots of places where you can go and sit and feel like you're away from everyone else, which is really important for our mental health and well-being. And I know it goes against everything we're drilled into as teachers about being able to see every single student on campus, but this is actually what the research shows supports better behavior and higher academic achievement. The students love their school, and the community is invited to use it and take care of it and feel ownership of it. And there's the sand volleyball court that the students won. There were lots of opportunities to integrate art into these schools that were redesigned in Berlin. So they partnered with local artists to make special features in each school. And that's another way to mentor students. The artists worked with the students to teach them how to build things and create things and design things, like this metal sculpture. Other schools have sandstone carvings made by the students, lots of other things. And then I want to show you my last examples are from New York. This is like, what can you do tomorrow if you had, well, okay, $10,000 might seem like a lot sometimes for schools, but this is a pretty low budget option. The New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene created a program where 10 high schools partnered with a graphic design studio and an architect, and they created, like, they did it their own. I know that's a really rough picture on the left there, but they created their own mental health poster campaign to share with their classmates and peers the importance of taking care of your mental health. And then as part of the project, they each school got a $10,000 grant or award to build a space that the students identified that they wanted. They asked for and received like chill rooms. This is just let's go hang out and rest somewhere by myself or talk. Meditation room, a garden. I think a couple of the schools made gardens for not that much money. So it doesn't have to be a total wholesale school transformation to be really effective in supporting our students. So this is just an overview. I shared school examples, but in Schools That Heal, I have 12 strategies, specific strategies that design teams and communities and teachers can look to, specifically supporting mental health, physical health, and climate resilience. but this is a reminder of those. And then if we think about those principles on a district or citywide scale, we can start moving, really improving public health, equity, and climate resilience, and give students hope for a better future by designing schools with mental health in mind. Thank you. If any of you are interested, you can use this code for my publisher to get a 30% discount. And she's also really interested in working with school districts to provide bigger discounts if you're interested in sharing with your teams or school partners, whoever you're working with. Any questions?
We have time for a couple questions, or if you want to add in the chat, we'll have some breakout time for small groups to discuss as well. And also, if you have any questions after the fact, we have a survey at the end, so we can make sure and get questions to Claire.
Mary V said you were raising your hand for a question.
Yes, thank you. I kind of mentioned it a little in the chat, but I wanted to see if we could have a little commentary about it. It's kind of a two-part question. One, I like a lot of the examples here, but I also feel like, you know, having the goals framed around models like Germany, you know, really kind of add to the erasure of local First People, Native people, and Indigenous people that were doing, you know, basically outdoor classrooms, you know, for millennia. And that some of those folks, contrary to common belief, you know, still exist and still teach their children in that way. Not just here, but around the world. So really talking about that as like, you know, as the best practice instead of another westernized model.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah.
And then I also wanted to just maybe share a couple of local examples if folks are not aware, and I'll drop some links in the chat. And these are, of course, you know, some of them are schools, you know, so they are buildings and not the best practice I just referred to. But you know, my daughter attended a Montessori school in Redlands called The Grove, which was an excellent place of learning that did include a lot of outdoor classroom space, and also for the junior high ages has a farm where children move outside of the structured classroom to a farm environment and do a lot of hands-on curriculum in those very critical ages where they tend to be more difficult to sit in the classroom, and then return back to a more traditional classroom in the high school years, but with mixed ages. So older children are learning alongside younger children and mentoring and modeling and you know, doing a lot more less rigid classroom age separation.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'll put a link in the chat for that. And then also I'm an alumni from Humboldt State University up north. So one of the got a lot of Humboldt alumni in the room. Just another example, I think, of a campus that, you know, still has buildings and classrooms and all that, but also has preserved a lot of natural aspects and aesthetics to the campus. And you still feel like you're in a forest, even though it is a college campus. Mm-hmm. So another, I think, a good example, and not so local, you know, like way Northern California. But I'm sure there are other examples that folks might be able to share. And if we could drop those links in the chat, or maybe people could just speak them on the mic. I think it would be helpful for us to know what are the local outdoor classroom environments that we can share with each other.
That would be great. And to your point, I think, because I often give this presentation to school districts where something like Berlin feels so foreign to them, the Berlin model. But you're absolutely right. There are so many, seems like people trying to go back to those traditional teaching ways with like forest school, preschools and forest schools that are for older children as well. And I think there's so much to learn from you about that. So in addition to like schools themselves that have really good models, designs, I think it would be really interesting to start a conversation about unschooling or other models of schooling that don't revolve around a building, that don't have a facility like this institutionalized building thing that we've been doing for 100 years here.
Right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Claire. And I know you have deadlines and so much going on. We really appreciate time and sharing this work with us. And we're excited to have this conversation to better understand the amazing assets we have in our region and have a discussion of, okay, what can we do next? What can we do to help build more healthy environments? So really appreciate it. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you so much. And I'd love to learn from each of you. If you want to stay connected, Mary and Emily have my contact information. Thank you all.